Hey, folks. Hey, Christian. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for joining us, Rafat. I'm just going to start just over again, just because there's been a few people join us. My name is Christian. I'm the moderator today. I'm the CMO for TourRadar, and I'd like to introduce our special guest, Rafat Ali. Most of you probably know him if you're in the travel industry. He is the CEO and founder of Skift. If you don't know Skift, then you probably don't know a lot about what's going on in the industry, because Skift reports tons on what's going on. They also do a lot of data and research. TourRadar benefited very recently working on a customer insights piece on the US customer for multi-day tours. Rafat's been around in the industry for quite a while. Previously he was the founder and CEO of Paid Content and Content Next, and which he sold in '08, I believe. And previously he was the managing editor of Silicon Alley. So welcome, Rafat. It's good to have you here today to talk about this crazy world we're in currently right now.
Boom times for travel, aren't they? Certainly boom times for news. If I don't know about the revenue part, but certainly the news part is there, unfortunately. Nice looking locked on beard, by the way. I don't know if this is your permanent beard or this is your locked on beard, because a lot of people are keeping locked on beards these days.
Yeah. Well, the beard is probably normal. The hair's just getting a little bit longer than normal, so I've opted not to have the home haircut.
Yeah. Well, I don't have that issue, so yeah, there's that.
So I just jumped in, as a good segue, Rafat. I'd be curious to know, you do a lot of reporting on different companies in the travel industry and how the industry itself is faring. But how is Skift faring throughout this? And how has the impact been on you personally and the company?
Yeah. Well, thank you again for inviting me. This is obviously an honor to be in front of all of you. Travel has been the most hit sector on the planet. This is obviously no surprise to anyone. Different sectors in travel, and I think we'll probably get into it, have been hit in different ways. Our business is getting money from the travel industry, and if travel industry has lost, 80-90% of their revenues in the last 2-3 months, obviously we've been hit in a very similar way. So we are a media and business information company that covers the business of travel, so all the sectors that all of you know. And we do it through news, research, conferences, marketing services, etc. We're in travel, so we're hit. A big part of our revenues is face-to-face events, so what happened to that as well. So that's stopped 100% today. So, and it hit us in Q1, which happens to be our most our slowest quarter. Q2, Q3, Q4 typically tends to be our bigger quarters. And so unfortunately definitely hit us hard, but we had to make the same decisions that I'm sure your company and every company in travel, and I'm sure now every company in larger business have been making. And so we had to do the cuts, unfortunately, deeply in the company. But one of the things that we tried to do was not to cut editorial and research. These are the teams that create the content that you see on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis on Skift. And so, my philosophy and our philosophy has been that editorial is the engine that will take us to recovery on the other side. And if we're not there for the industry today in their time of need through the right type of news and information and analysis and research, then why should they be there for us when the recovery starts? So, our people have been doing the best work of their lives. So our traffic has been phenomenal over the last 2 months. March and April has been the most engagement months we've had in our 8-year history. And so, that's the silver lining that I'm going to take with it and then go from there.
Well, it's good to hear that you haven't cut back on editorial, and I think it'll add some color to the next few questions. But let's just jump right in. For travel, what segment, in your belief, has been hit the hardest?
Well, I guess every sector. I'm trying to think of a sector that's not been hit. Any sector that you can think of that's not been hit in travel. I don't know, like maybe insurance, but I guess they're paying out a lot of money, so they're probably in the same boat as everybody else. So I can't really see a sector that's not been hit. Airlines have been hit, hotels have been hit, destinations, tour operators like the world that you play in have been badly hit. And so I would say that the big companies have access to capital that the smaller companies don't. So I would say small businesses in general, of which travel has a huge amount, majority of the businesses in your part of the world, tour operator part of the world, in tours and activities part of the world, in accommodations part of the world, et cetera, are small businesses. So I would say small businesses that don't have access to capital, whether public markets or private markets, or sometimes even government aid. You've probably seen, many of you have heard what's happened in US in terms of the small business aid. It's been sort of very spotty. And so I would say small businesses are the ones that many of them will close down, I know, unfortunately. And so I would say that's probably the most hurt. I heard the G Adventures executive before, and he said that unfortunately that maybe the group tour, which is what he was mentioning, group tour will probably be the last one to come back.
Yeah, first in, last out. He
first
said.
in, last out. Yeah, I agree to an extent, but there's a bit of a silver lining there, that I think us being trapped in our houses for so long, and when we are able to travel, we want to travel in with other people. That's, I don't know if that will be a mass behavior, but that's certainly one aspect of it. And in a socially distanced way, if that's possible, I think there's going to be smaller groups and private groups, etc., that I think will benefit, and I think that type of travel will potentially go on. But we're still yet to see what that looks like, because I don't think any tour operator has started back any tours pretty much anywhere in the world.
Not that I'm overly familiar with. I've seen a couple of small tour operators still operating, apparently, like in Iceland. So they have a policy of if anyone can get out there and meet them, they'll take them on a tour. But beyond that, I haven't seen much. But what's your thought about first to recover? If John's correct about maybe multi-day tours in some cases are going to have more struggle. Is there someone that you think will just snap out of this much quicker?
I think that, and I'm sure this is of no surprise to anyone, I think local travel, which is drive travel, distance, 2 hours distance. I live in New York City, certainly the most hit city in the planet. And so 2 hours from here, upstate New York, if I can drive, I could get in my car, drive. That type of travel potentially will be the first one back. There's already some early evidence of vacation rentals, which you would assume have been badly hit. Yes, they have been. But if organized vacation rental that is professionally cleaned, that I can go and clean myself, meaning I have control over the space, potentially would be the first type of travel to come back. There's been some debate on whether it's going to be hotels or vacation rentals, because like hotels, yes, they have the organization to clean it properly, versus vacation rentals / Airbnb, which may or may not have. But I think the people who were very keen on Airbnb before, if they have a semblance of I can control the space myself, I don't see why it would have an issue on the other end of it. Obviously, sharing somebody's couch in a house, like that type of Airbnb is gone, but full houses that are relatively professionally managed, I think that's a type of travel that would probably continue to stay. I think, unfortunately, business travel, I think, is going to be one of the hit sectors. Travel that is related to events, whether it's professional events or non-professional events, I think that type of travel is hit for a while to come. I think air travel is going to be a while to come. So obviously it depends on how borders open up in different countries. There's a story I just read that Czech Republic just announced today that they're opening up parts of travel. Of course, they're in an area in Central Europe that actually has been not as badly hit as you would imagine. But their travel restrictions, easing of travel restrictions, only depends on what happens in the neighboring countries, right? So, so it depends on how travel opens across different countries in the world and how they start to come back. Unfortunately, if fighting the pandemic has not been a global coordinated response at all anywhere in the world, then reopening, we have less hopes on that. But it is needed, 100% needed. U.S. Travel, which is the U.S. travel lobbying organization here in the U.S., came out with a plan for reopening. But it's wishes. It's not action, because you really can't dictate action beyond a certain point. So it's a list, it's a wish list. So that's the unfortunate part. I think Canada is probably in a much better shape on that front than US is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know we're kind of hoping, you know, the bubbles or the neighboring countries will be sort of our key starting point. You know, we're looking quite carefully at Australia, New Zealand, both, you know, have reported
have started this corridor. Yeah, very interesting.
Exactly. And I'm hoping, you know, those sort of starting customers or these travelers are going to be, well, I was planning to go to, I don't know, maybe to Sri Lanka, but maybe I'll just go to New Zealand this year because it's the only place I can go outside of my own country.
And historically, you would think US and Canada would have that corridor. It just makes a lot of sense. But unfortunately, US has been so badly hit that, especially, so I think that will be a bit of an issue. Maybe the western part of US and the western part of Canada have a thing because they're less hit compared to the eastern part. So yeah, remains to be seen.
So for travel companies themselves, you know, what are some of the wrong things to be focusing on during this time? Like, what are some mistakes? Well, maybe naming names, you know.
Yeah, I think initially, I mean, you look, customer service was an issue. It was all the companies, I'm sure, including companies that you work with as well. Nobody saw the volume, and initially the response was to either delay travel or give a voucher, etc. I think all of the companies have come around to doing refunds. If they haven't, the government has mandated for refunds to happen. For most part, this is not true for everyone. I think the important thing for travel companies today is to be focused on the key stakeholders that they have. This is not unlike any other time, but it becomes even more important. Your key stakeholders are your employees and your customers. I think those are the big two. And third is the community that you exist in. This is, you know, shareholders come last. And so in these times. And so I would say focus on employees and business survival, customers, and then potentially see if those two are managed, can you potentially help the community that you exist in? And travel exists in a community 100% in, you know, all the companies. So whether it's a tour operator or a tours and activities provider or a large hotel or airlines, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say the mistake would be to think too much about your stock price at this point.
Yeah, I think it's more about long-term survival at this stage, right?
At this stage, if you survive, you win. Like, let's get to, like I've been saying, every Friday is a win. Like, if you get to another Friday, I feel like it's a win. I'm going to wait for another Friday. I'm going to wait for another Friday. And in fact, I Googled the other day, how many weeks left in 2020? And I think it was like 37 weeks left. So I need to win another 37 times. So that
see a lot of
like
X's on your calendar.
Correct. I think
Amazing.
That's true for every travel company, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of one challenge after another. I think it's kind of like, you know, versus large crisis, which of course is the pandemic, and then just trying to deal with each individual hurdle. You know, let's just, you know, take another jump to, you know, we've got a lot of startups listening in today.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, obviously some of them had some big aspirations to jump in this industry, you know, and maybe they're at the point where they haven't invested too deeply, but so they're probably thinking, well, heck, I might get out of this industry completely, or maybe I need to pivot, or maybe, they're in the perfect spot. What do you think, what would be your advice, obviously without having a specific example, what would be your advice to a small tech startup right now that's in the industry?
Yeah. It's a tough one. Like historically in recessions or downturns, typically pivot to B2B is the advice that everybody gives, right? Like pivot to the B2B side of the industry. But if the companies don't have money to invest or the willingness to change any of their tech stack today, because today is not the time anybody would think about changing their tech stack wholesale, at least. So it's a hard one. I know the companies, for instance, in the tours and activities space have pivoted to providing online classes or online experiences. So certainly that's an example. It's not as much money as you would get in a physical tours, but at least there's something happening. I bet even in your world, Christian, in the tour operator world, some of that is happening, where some of these tour operators are providing some sort of an online experience. In the event space, so imagine a lot of event tech startups that were selling ticket technology or venue tech, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of them are pivoting to, which is, the part of what we're speaking, the platform, like they're pivoting to Hopin like tech. And so, is an example of, in fact, I forget, there's a company called, I'm forgetting the name. Anyway, so they've added these types of virtual solutions for events. So, companies that are providing automation services of any sort in travel today potentially have a future, and they should be thinking about, automation meets hygiene meets lower labor costs. If I can bottle all those three together and sell it, I should have a great business from here on. So I think those are types of things that startups potentially are looking at. And then at the end of the day, extending your runway, if there's any way you can extend your runway. I don't know how many US versus Canadian startups on this, but in US, there's the small business loan. I don't know if there's an equivalent in the Canadian startup world in terms of money from the government to help, which I'm guessing probably a lot better than US. So, those are the types of things that startups should be focused on.
Great, some good advice. Yeah, there are some of those opportunities of investment from the government that's in Canada as well. I'm just gonna, I'll ask another question, but if people could add, any questions for Rafat. We don't have a lot of time together left. We have about 3 or 4 minutes, but just throw it straight into the event chat right here. But until I start seeing some questions more, I'll ask my next one. Obviously, China's been a lesson for us in a lot of ways. They were the first hit by the pandemic. They appear to be the first ones coming out of it. We've seen mobs of, I think it was a Skift article that I saw with all the people lining up for the attractions. What lessons do you think, the Chinese situation has for us here in the rest of the world, if not North America?
Yeah, I think it's the same. I mean, we're looking at it and saying domestic travel, and I think that is really what it is at this point. Domestic travel is what is the lesson everybody's taking out. There was an initial burst of hotel surge, booking surge. These are people, either medical workers or health workers, that were using the hotels after the lockdown ended, or people going back from their hometowns to their work towns. This is a very typical behavior in China, and so. And then it's plateaued a little bit since. So I think domestic, so the lesson is in US, even as we start, US and North America, as we start to reopen now, you're going to see a little bit of pent up demand. So there's going to be an immediate burst. People, whether they're going for their work or essential workers or people who really want to travel. Then there's going to be a plateau. And then I think we're then going to wait for most part for the vaccine to come on the other end of it. So I think that's the behavior that I see happening. That probably won't happen for airlines, but in general for travelers, I would see that's essentially the lesson to be learned. The other lesson is coordinated response is so important, meaning there has to be a state infrastructure that that helps private sector and obviously public sector, from screening to temperature checks to everything else. And the more there's coordination, the more the response, the more the world will come back faster.
Interesting. Just an interesting question came in from Natasha. Skift trademarked the word over tourism way before anyone was talking about it.
We didn't trademark it. That was a rumor. We certainly coined it, but yes.
They also trademarked or come up or were the first to talk about some of the other predicted trends. Has Rafat been trademarking or coming up with any new words that will describe new important trends out of this exciting situation? I asked because it seems a good indicator for the rest of us.
Yeah, silver lining, is that a new term? I think, look, radical localism, it's a phrase that I've been using. I didn't coin it. If you Google it, actually, there's some great articles on it, which is not just a travel concept. It's I think for the first time in a long time, certainly all of us living in big cities are aware, hyper aware of a 4 to 5 to 10 block radius around where we live. We know which shops are open, which shops are closed, who's being affected, who's not being affected. The church next, like I'm aware of everything. And can you bottle that up and extend those circles a little bit and then apply that to travel? And will people have better awareness of local businesses, small businesses, and will then vote with their feet and their dollars when the world starts to open up? So I think that is something that I am very keen on, and personally, as well as as a media outlet, we're very keen on seeing independent small businesses potentially benefit as a result of it. Obviously, they have the least amount of resources; they've been hit the hardest out of it. But if something comes out of it, hopefully, radical localism comes out of it.
Awesome. Well, you guys have heard it here. Are you going to trademark it?
No, it's not our term at all. No. But it's actually some city living type term that doesn't apply directly to travel, but has a lot of implications there.
Well, I've got to wrap things up. I wish I could talk to you a lot longer, Rafat. It's been an absolute pleasure having you join us today, and hopefully
thank you, and we'll see all of you face to face at some point.
Sounds great. Take care. I'm going to now send off to Iris, who's going to be talking to Malia from Jordan Tourism. Thanks so much, and talk to you soon.